Hi, friends. I'm Nancy Fox.
And I'm Elaine Doran. Welcome back to Deep Diving Divas, where we go beneath the surface with people whose courage and stories remind us what really matters in life.
And today we are diving into grief. Now, grief comes for all of us, fortunately, not on our schedule, not with a warning, and never in a way that we're ready for.
And when it does hit, it doesn't just break life as we knew it. It reshapes us painfully, beautifully, unexpectedly.
Everybody, today we are privileged to sit down with someone who's walked through a mysterious loss and somehow emerged not just surviving, but really thriving.
She's Dr. Martha Carr, a licensed marriage and family therapist in Los Angeles. She's a prior adjunct professor at Cal State Northridge, a writer, and is currently on staff at Hope Connection, a nonprofit organization providing grief support.
And Dr. Martha not only supports others through grief, she had to navigate her own when her husband died mysteriously in an accident. Today, she's sharing what grief really looks like, the truth, the rawness, and the hope on the other side.
So let's take the deep dive.
Ready? Let's get started.
Hey there, friends, it's Nancy and Elaine. They're the Deep Diving Divas, it's quite a name. They're diving deep into the things that matter most, from friendships to family and so much more. Join them each week for a splash of fun.
Hi, Martha. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Martha, we met several years ago from our dear friend Helen Anderson, but this was before your life changed forever.
Martha, we are so grateful you're here today. Your story isn't easy, and yet you've chosen to share it so others don't feel alone in theirs. Thank you for saying yes to this conversation.
You're more than welcome, and thank you for asking me, and nice to see you again, Nancy. It's lovely to have this connection.
Definitely. Martha, let's begin at the moment when everything changed. It was 8 years ago that you experienced a sudden loss, and just unimaginable loss is what I really want to say. Can you take us back to that moment that changed your life forever?
Sure. My husband always had a dream of sailing around the world, and he put it off till the kids were grown. And I did not want to go because I'm not so great out at sea. I could do a little day sailing, but the open sea was a little challenging for me. So he decided to go. And he first went down to Mexico and stayed there and was about to make a huge crossing. This was about now 6 months later, and I had gone to see him a few times, and he'd flown home a few times. So we had seen each other during that time. And about 3 weeks into a 5-week crossing between Mexico and the Marquesas, he clearly was in distress. We were getting satellite messages. We did not have a sat phone. They were very, very expensive at the time. No Starlink, anything like that. So we agreed on a messenger that he could write text through satellite because there's no, cell coverage out there, obviously. And it was clear that something was amiss because he was hallucinating or sending messages that didn't make sense. They were very bizarre. And he thought he had been boarded by pirates and that then they had left, which I found, if pirates are going to board your ship, they're not going to just leave and not do anything, So plus he was thousands of miles from anywhere where there could even be pirates. So we contacted the Coast Guard, and which is in Hawaii for that area of the Pacific Ocean. And it started out on a Sunday and lasted all day with these bizarre messages back and forth. And by Sunday evening, he said goodbye. and everything went dark. Everything went blank. There were no more messages. Nobody could reach him, and we didn't know what happened. So all the messages stopped and everything went silent. And my kids had come over. Well, my daughter was still back east. She didn't know yet because she was giving birth to a baby. She had just given birth to a baby like the week before. And I knew they were 3 hours ahead. By that point, it was evening here, and I didn't want to disturb her with such terrifying news. So I waited till the morning to talk to her. But my son came right over and was with me the whole day. And everyone was just working like crazy to try to figure out what was going on. And there was no contact. He had an EPIRB, which is an emergency source that would send immediately to the Coast Guard where he was, his location. That didn't get activated, so nobody knew anything. But the Coast Guard got very involved. And just to make a long story short, for 3 weeks, they searched for him. He was like 1,800 miles from Hawaii, where the Coast Guard was, and 1,200 miles from Mexico and 1,500 from the Marquesas. And the Coast Guard said he is in one of the most untrackable places on Earth in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There are no islands. Yes. Our planes only have 1,000-mile radius, so we can't get out there. So they had to wait until, for days until they thought if he drifted, he would be within the 1,000-mile range. They sent a plane to the South Pacific that then took off and looked for him. Nothing. And they searched for 3 weeks at just thousands and thousands. And they sent carriers and big ships from all over the world changed their patterns to help the Coast Guard look for this one little guy who had this crazy dream out in the middle of the ocean, and were in contact with them. They were calling out, looking for his signal, anything, and nobody ever found a trace. So we didn't know what happened to him, but after 3 weeks, they had to, of course, put their resources elsewhere. And that was the most profound experience. They were so loving. They called every day, twice a day, to tell us what they were doing. And they walked such a beautiful line between compassion for us and here's the facts, here's what we're doing, very detailed. And they got lots of departments involved, but ultimately he disappeared. And I had a sense the night when I got the last message that he was gone. So, but they said, well, it could take 2 years for pieces of the boat to show up anywhere. So we're going to keep it as an active case. We're going to keep his name in the hospital system in case he turns up at a hospital somewhere, or he's, but it's been 8 years and I'm sure he's had his, I hate to say it, but his burial at sea. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Martha, the irony, you being a therapist, you've had to deal with others and help others, but, what surprised you the most? I mean, something that no training or experience could prepare you for your loss. What did you do? I mean, from that moment on,
well,
how did you, who helped you?
My family was amazing. My kids, my neighbors were just unbelievable. They would call me every day, say, what do you need? I'm at Trader Joe's. Do you need something? I mean, I live in this little community. We're very, very close. My friends were there for me. They were checking in with me all the time. And, even extended family, cousins, everybody just kind of swooped in and helped take care of me. Some of the time I felt like I just wanted to be alone and sort of not have to deal with anything and just sit on my deck and just stare at birds. I mean, really, that's what I did for many, many hours, just trying to digest, because my whole world was turned upside down and in a very bizarre way. It took, and there was this always lingering question of, could he turn up? I would have dreams of him knocking on the door full of barnacles and seaweed and wet with a suitcase saying, I made it, I guess it's a very primitive, archaic, sense that our loved ones can survive years at sea. I mean, they used to in the 15 and 1600s. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Stranded on a desert island, and they've made movies about that. So of course,
Yeah.
I guess it's human nature with a loved one to want to hold out hope.
Yeah.
But Martha, so now you really have, you've been through, she's the expression hell and back. And what ultimately did grief teach you? And, you have a profound article on your website, and we're going to give your website at the end of our episode. But, it's so profound. You learned a lot. And so what's the most profound thing that grief taught you?
Well, it's been a long process. 9 months before my husband died, my mother died. So I was still grieving the loss of my mother. And, it's interesting when you lose someone, if you have your spouse or partner there to help you through, it's a lot easier than not having anyone except, you have to turn to other people, family, whatever. So when my husband died, she wasn't there to help me. Luckily, he was on his trip for part of that, but he was there for a piece of after my mother died, thankfully. But so it was a double whammy. But I was just like, your whole life gets rearranged. Your whole sense of self becomes kind of obliterated momentarily. Luckily, as I said, I had a lot of community that was there if I needed them. And some of them were going through it too, because they knew Richard very well. And so they were grieving, and it actually helped me that people who knew him were coming close to me, because that helps with grief a lot. But over time, one of the things I had done is see a therapist, because it was just such an overwhelming loss. And after about 9 months, I went into a grief group, because I thought I need to talk about this more than once a week with a person. I need a community of people who are grieving. And that was a 2-year experience, which was really, really helpful to me. But one of the things I learned right away over the initial 6 months is that one of the ways you can recover from any kind of trauma or grief is through creating meaning in your life. You have to create new meaning for yourself, because the experience when you lose someone you've been with, we were together 43 years, and so we kind of had grown up together, had kids together, is that your sense of purpose and meaning is totally disrupted and dysregulated, and you don't know who you are anymore. It's like somebody gave the analogy of 2 rose bushes that grow together, and if one dies, you don't even know how they're connected until you start seeing the little dead pieces of flowers, and you've got to kind of pull them apart. And it isn't the rose bush that you've experienced or that because it all looked like one bush, so there is a sense of identity in the couple that gets internalized by each person. And that is a huge loss. And so the future can look really bleak. You can feel like you're dreading going forward. You're lonely. You miss I missed just having a conversation, coming home, guess who I saw today? Or this is what happened at the market. Or, I could call people and I would do that, but it's just different when your partner's there, even if you're in kind of separate rooms and you're just talking to each other about what's happening. So it was a real internal shift. But one of the things that evolved over time for me was the realization that I had to develop new parts of myself. I kind of had to. I learned how to do things that my husband used to do. I know I fixed a piece in my refrigerator, ordered the part, got it done. He used to do all that stuff. I was so proud of myself, I had to take on projects that were normally in his purview, or call someone to do it for the first time, because he was very handy and used to do everything. So I gained all these kind of resources. But also I started to fill the time with things that I was always interested in, but never gave the time to, like writing. And I started writing about grief, and I started going to a writing class, started writing these articles when I went on staff at Hope Groups, which is the group I went through for my own grief. And I later went on staff there as a therapist. They have a newsletter, and I started writing. They asked me to write for the newsletter. So, I had to do it, but I loved doing it. And, when you're raising kids or you have a partner and your life is full, and I have a full-time career and all of that. I just kept pushing it aside. I would do a little, but it forced me to, the time I had kind of forced me to fill it with something that would feel empowering to me and enriching. So I started writing. And
sorry to interrupt, because I love how you are talking about how this rose bush, I mean, it's also to me, the analogy of now that one rose, that little bud that was there now can fully bloom when the other rose has disappeared. It's giving it that fuel because you've created all these things with your writing and whatever. But I'm just, this is a little bit different kind of question than with your own grief, but how can people like us at our age prepare for the loss? As yours was sudden. And I think some people, when they have a spouse that's sick and they're going on, they're used to, they're preparing themselves for that time. But I mean, it's this fear as we reach this age. What do you tell people about, if only we could prepare ourselves better for the inevitable, it would help. It seems like with the grief that follows, it's kind of like, gee, how did this happen to me? I didn't think my husband was ever going to die, or any of it. You know what I mean? It's like, this is nothing new. So,
right.
What would you suggest?
I don't know that you can really fully prepare. It's like preparing for having children. You don't know what it's like until you have the experience, because it's so embodied in your body that even if you thought about it, it wouldn't be felt in the same way. But if someone is sick for a long time, or someone is going to die, and in the grief group, most of the people there had experienced the loss of their loved one that way, through an illness. Some were sudden, but often they were getting prepared for it. And one of the things that is important is to realize you're going through a kind of grieving process beforehand. So sometimes you're doing some of the work already. It's called, there's a term called ambiguous grief, which means you're grieving, but it isn't quite the same as when you've actually gone through the loss. And you can allow yourself to experience and feel whatever you're feeling. That's one of the most important things that I discovered after grief is, I had so many feelings. I had sadness, of course, but I had anger. There were moments of relief. There were moments of joy. And I know people get very guilty. Oh, I felt happy today and I just lost my husband like 3 months ago. How can I be happy? But one of the things I've learned, I started reading a lot about grief and a lot of, experts on grieving. And they say that the moments of joy actually help you connect to others. And one of the most important things in getting through grief is connecting to others, and also to de-stress, because when you're losing someone, it's very stressful. Or if you're tending to them as a caregiver, that's very stressful. And there are 3 areas that can help with that. One is giving yourself the time for yourself, and going into nature is very powerful. Nature is a natural de-stressor. The other is through the arts, so that if you have a way to express yourself, either through writing or painting or dancing or music, whatever it is, that can help you express emotions that you can't even put into words yet necessarily. And even participating by watching movies or going to theater or reading poetry or whatever it is can help you work through some of those non-verbalized experiences you're having that may not be clear to you. And you can be doing that even if you're anticipating the loss. But it's important to know that you're in a process of saying goodbye. And it's important, if you can, if your partner or spouse or parent or whoever it is there, to have some kind of healing conversations as much as possible, to say everything between you might have wanted to say or ask, so that you feel later like you don't regret not having asked this or not knowing that, or not having, the most important thing is not having said, I love you, or I care about you, or this is what you meant to me. One of the things my mother did that was so inspiring, because she had cancer and she was dying, and she knew she was dying. She was in hospice for 3 days, but luckily she still had her mind with her. And she called everybody that she had connection with. Her son-in-laws, her daughter-in-laws, her cousins, her sisters, and told them, she said, I'm dying. I mean, she's so practical. She goes, well, I am dying, and I just want to tell you what you meant to me. And I just loved when we had this. And I just was like, oh my gosh, it was so moving.
Everybody should have that opportunity.
But what a gift.
Yeah.
What a gift she gave everybody. So if they ever wondered, plus it must have been cathartic for her to, kind of be able to express her feelings. But that's brutal. That would be rough to do.
It was very emotional. And, when my dad passed away, he was not conscious those last, like the last week. So he couldn't do something like that. And there's lots of experiences like that. Not everyone has that opportunity or a desire necessarily to do that. But, it was meaningful. And again, you're creating meaning about who's been what to whom in your life. And that's a real gift to leave someone, because ultimately, after the pain kind of subsides and sometimes loneliness sets in, if you have been able to come to terms and accepted whatever the loss is, you pull the person into your heart and you carry them with you wherever you go. And that feels like, they're with you in some way. Whereas at first, all you're aware of is the absence and the loss. And
that's a good point, Martha, because you know what? A lot of people say, are you over it yet? I always find that an outrage. Over it yet? Why would you ever want to be over someone that you loved and cherished? Whether it be a parent, a child, a spouse, a friend, it lessens. Like you said, it lessens over time. But you never why would you want to get over it, right?
Yeah, no. You're not over it. It's a journey you go through, and it transforms a bit. Oh, and I forgot to mention the third thing is connection. Besides nature and creative arts, is community and connection. And it's through connection, even to your loved one, that allows you to carry the grief in a different way, and connection to others that, help keep that fire burning in some way. But you don't ever get over it. It's always going to be a part of you. And you realize the one thing that was changed for me so dramatically is realizing that loss is a part of life. Grief is a part of loss, and it's different. It changes everything, but there's also opportunity for growth and change in you individually to create new meaning and to keep going and to develop new areas of your life. And so, from trauma comes something new sometimes.
Grief affects your friendships in a lot of ways. And I think that I mentioned to you briefly when we were talking that we had lost our son, my husband's son, my stepson in a car accident.
Sorry.
But it was, some people pull away when there's been a loss. And, some will come, your friends will be there for you, and some just pull away. They can't really face it. For me, I felt like we had leprosy. There were people who could not look at us, didn't want not be with us because all they could see was the loss of their child, And so what does that mean? Or why do people do that?
That is a really fascinating phenomena. I think death raises a lot of anxiety for people and a lot of fear. And also, I think they're fearful of saying the wrong thing, and they don't want you to be upset. So they don't know what to say. And I can tell you that when a person said to me, like within even the first year, "How are you?" I literally didn't know how to answer that. And even just saying fine was not sufficient, because your internal world is suddenly so out of sync with the outer world that you're just sitting there going, I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know how I am. And so people, the best thing they can do is just be with you, give you a hug, just say, I'm so sorry for your loss, or, I'm here if you need anything, or, just to be there. They don't have to do anything. They have to just let it be known that they have warmth, if they share a story about your loved one with you, that's beautiful. That's wonderful, because you feel like they care. I mean, some of my most cherished moments are people maybe I haven't seen in a few years who came and said, "Oh, I just wanted to tell you, have I ever told you this one story about this little interaction I had with Richard?" And I went, "No." And it was so heartwarming that they were embracing that. To know that somebody else is carrying that person in their heart is so meaningful to the person who's lost that person.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's right. Martha, we're going to have to close soon.
Oh,
If there's one little nugget that we can all take away, can you think of something that you'd like to share? And then we want to give your website and how people can contact you.
okay. Well, the one little piece that I wrote in my last article about my grief teacher, what I've learned about grief or what grief has taught me in the last 8 years is that over time, grief can feel like your friend, that you're afraid to let it go. And a lot of people will say, if you ask them, what is it about the grief that you feel so connected to? And they say, well, if I stop feeling the suffering, it's really the suffering they're talking about, the pain, then that's the last thread or connection to them. And I won't have them anymore. They'll really be lost. And, I found that was true, and that I was like, oh, I'm keeping company with my grief. My grief is keeping me company. And this was like 5 years later, I'm talking about still holding, and it wasn't all the time, but just there would be moments. And I realized that, over time, that does change. And then the person, it converts into carrying the person, as I said, in your soul, in your heart. The warmth feeling is there. It doesn't mean that grief can't be activated or that you don't miss the person. You do. You always do. And you always can have moments, even 20 years later, where grief can suddenly, it's called a stug, a sudden temporary upsurge of grief, where you can just get you drive by something and it just reminds you, and suddenly you're like back to where you were the first few months. But other than that, people can linger in the suffering for a long time. And all I'm saying is you don't have to do anything about it, but know that it will get integrated and it will change and grow into something different, but you won't lose that person ever. You always hold that person in your body and in your heart.
That's beautiful. Martha, how can people get a hold of you to read this incredible article? Share your website.
Okay. My website is mcarr, MCARR, MFT, as in marriage family therapist. It's all one word, mcarrmft.com. And all my articles are posted there. I have 12 up there right now, and a few others. And my phone is there if they want to reach me, or they can reach me by email at martha.a.carr@gmail.com.
Great. That's wonderful. Martha, thank you so much. It was so great to see you again.
Thank you so much.
Soothing words, Martha.
Oh, thank you.
Sure. Really.
Well, you've all brought out the heart in me, so I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Great.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Nancy, it's hard for me to really fathom this, if you'll excuse the pun, that to lose your spouse, your partner, your loved one, and not know. It was a mystery. This was a total mystery. And they have never found him and never had an answer to what happened. I don't understand how she was able to do it.
Yeah, but you know how she did it, and she shared it with all of us. You got to do the work, and the work is defined many different ways. For Martha, she said she reached out to support groups, grief groups. She started writing. She's written a lot of articles. There's that fabulous one that's really helpful on her website, so everybody check it out. Yes. Or, and she's still involved with this grief group. It's called hopegroups.org. So if you're in the LA area, check it out. But she found nature and writing and really her friendships. Look at how valuable her friendships were and her family.
It's a great story.
Yeah. Everybody, if you want to reach us, if you want to join us on Instagram, Facebook, join us on our YouTube, or listen to our podcast, we're everywhere at Deep Diving Divas. Till next time, thank you all.
Bye-bye. Be well.